Welcome to GoPowercat.com's Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. Now, here's Fitz.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Pregame Podcast. I hope you're doing well. I am Tim Fitzgerald, publisher of GoPowercat.com, and we do this every week through the football season, at least every game week. And last week we previewed Kansas State, Arizona State, a game that, well, we got completely wrong, but this week we get to explain what went wrong for Kansas State in that loss at home against Arizona State, because they reload and get to do it again, this time with the Cincinnati Bearcats coming into Bill Snyder Family Stadium for the second to last regular season game. And now we're wondering, what course will the rest of the season take for these Wildcats, because the two poles of that possibility are wildly different. First, let me remind you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel, hit the thumbs up, and leave those comments. Appreciate it so much. And we're sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. If you have roofing needs here in the Manhattan area or around the state of Kansas, surrounding states even, go check out their website, see if you can get a bid from Weddle & Sons. We did the same thing and loved everything about our experience with the company. Weddle & Sons Roofing, go check them out in Manhattan, Kansas. So Kansas State did lose last week. It was a stunning performance in the fact that it seemed so lackadaisical for a team that was still on the outside, but with a viable opportunity to make it to the Big 12 championship. They played like a team who really didn't care about that. And it was troubling to K-Staters. We heard boos inside of Bill Snyder Family Stadium, and that's not happening very often throughout history. Kansas State now at 7-3 overall and 4-3 in the conference. They're probably not making it to Arlington, but they can do something with this season that's remarkable. At 7 wins with 2 regular season games to go and a bowl game, the Cats can still get to 10 victories, a hallmark of a pretty good season. Well, at least before the playoff era settled in, and going to the playoffs is the ultimate measurement. But also they could lose out, and the team we saw last week might just do that and end up at 7-6, a wild disappointment from what preseason expectations were, and even expectations for this team just a few weeks ago. We will get you ready for Cincinnati and Kansas State. Game kicks off at 7 p.m. because if it's a K-State game, it's probably a night game, and it'll be shown on ESPN2. So it's supposed to be nice weather, which is a benefit. If you remember, last year's senior night was not exactly ideal playing conditions. And this is senior night because the Cats will wind up their season at Iowa State next weekend. And if you've been watching our show, you know how it works. We usually have Brien Hanley in first to talk about K-State, but Big B is on the injured reserve this week. And so we're going to have Cole Carmody step in for him and break down where Kansas State's at heading into this game. Then Ryan Wallace will step in for his usual breakdown of the opponents. It's kind of hard to get a full grasp on Cincinnati because K-State's lost 2 in a row and Cincinnati's now lost 3 in a row. And then we'll hear from Chris Klieman. And if you've been following along, you know he's been going through some personal stuff, some family matters, a serious health concern, not within his own household, but very close to it, that has, well, it's been a distraction, and he was quite emotional after last Saturday's game. On Monday, when we met with him for the press conference, he said the family heard some good news between the end of the game Saturday and him seeing us on Monday. And so that is very good. And you can see that his mood is much better. And then we go to Avery Johnson, who I think is a little worn out by the season and probably disappointed in how his team played. So we'll get to those guys after Ryan Wallace, and then we'll bring in Ryan Gilbert to bring us to a close with the sports gambling odds around this game and what he thinks you should be doing if you are inclined to sports bet. But let's get rolling with the breakdown of Kansas State and where they're at right now with our own Cole Carmody. Cole, thank you for sitting in on the pregame show. I missed the big Palooka, but he is under the weather. He looks like a giant chipmunk, but only with nuts in one cheek. It's just blown up like it's not pretty. And Brien Hanley's a pretty man, so it's hard to look at. So we will muster on without him, and we're going to break down Kansas State and where they're at right now. Let's try not to break down in tears as we discuss where Kansas State's at. But what is Cole Carmody's number one thing that Kansas State needs to do differently in this game as opposed to what is put out on the field or how it's approached the last 2 games?
Man, I think it's get off to a good start.
Yeah.
I think what the stat says, 3 points in the last 3 games, which in the last 3 first quarters combined, that's just unacceptable. And remember a few years ago, Fitz, when the 3rd quarter was the bugaboo for K-State. They would come out at halftime, and they just simply couldn't do anything on offense. Well, they fixed that pretty quickly with Colin Klein. Now it seems to be the 1st quarter, which is typically the opposite, because usually you get those scripts, those offensive coordinators script out those opening drives, and typically the offense has more success than the defense, but it's kind of been the opposite for K-State. So I think if they're able to get off to a good start, kind of get the crowd, the positive vibes going inside of Bill Snyder Family Stadium, that could bode well for some future success.
I would agree. Start fast, but do they need to go fast? It's a topic that is on the table because K-State did kind of go to a hurry-up offense, in my book, way too late last Saturday. And they moved the ball. Was that Arizona State letting them move the ball, but not in big chunks because they were playing prevent? Or did K-State find something with pacing that seemed to help Avery Johnson in this offense?
I think they did. I really believe that they did. And that's kind of something that Avery has fed off of. And I think with his multi-sport background, it kind of makes sense because you think about it from a basketball perspective, Fitz. Once the run starts, it's really hard to stop. Well, Avery Johnson was obviously a pretty good basketball player. We've all seen the clip of him dunking at Mays High School. I think he kind of gets that killer instinct. When he smells blood in the water, you know what? He's ready to go. And so you pick up a 15, a 20-yard gain on first or second down. There's no reason K-State shouldn't be running to the line, looking over for a play, and then going. To me, the biggest thing, Fitz, is maybe not so much about going fast as it is not substituting as much. And Chris Klieman had a very interesting answer and talking about the NCAA rule that let Arizona State sub so much. But if you have your 12 personnel, your 2 tight end sets that you love so much, and you're able to split those guys out wide, which they've done in the past, I think that leave the guys you got in and experiment with it for a drive. Go nonstop without subbing, because if you don't sub, then the defense can't sub. So if you can catch them in a package that you really like, there's nothing to say that you can't bring those 2 tight ends down, go double tight, and then spread them back out and have them play as wide receivers. So I think maybe that's something to keep an eye on, is the substitutions on Saturday. It might be an interesting strategy K-State might try and employ.
Don't run plays to your own sideline. I got to be honest, I didn't know that rule.
Me neither.
That window for substitution opens up if the offensive team ends a play at its sideline, whether it goes out of bounds or just is kind of over beyond the hashes, because it's hard to monitor if players came in. So it automatically opens up the substitution window. That wasn't my problem. My problem was leaving it open.
Mm-hmm.
They would bring in players, and then they'd bring in more players, and maybe more. You've got opportunity to substitute. Do it. You don't have to have the entire play clock. I thought that was out of hand. But as Chris Klieman said, that's the rules. Arizona State used them. The referees did what they do and live with it. Weird. I'd never seen it, but you know what? Good coaches have those in their back pocket. They know when to take advantage of them. They know those loopholes, like a planned penalty or something that we've seen also go on in college football this year. It's craziness. But yeah, they pick up the pace. The big question is, will the offensive line play better, Cole? Because this is a problem. It's a problem that it's become glaring. I mean, K-State lost a touchdown last Saturday because an offensive lineman wandered upfield on a passing play, but he didn't wander upfield like he was just, in the zone trying to pass block. He was run blocking. He was clearly run blocking on a pass play. Yep. And he got up past 3 yards and he just kept going and called back a touchdown. I about lost my mind when I saw that. How are these players still screwing up play calls? But the line's got to be better. And I'm a proponent of moving Connor Riley out of the box down to the field. If he wants to call plays from there, that's what Chris Klieman wants. Good, fine, whatever. I mean, I think Matt Wells needs to have a bigger voice. But look, having Connor Riley away from his offensive line is not working. It may not be as talented, but that's all the more reason why he needs to be there.
Mm-hmm.
He could have gotten away with this last year when he had Cooper Beebe, but now this year he doesn't have Cooper Beebe. He needs to be on the field, period. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the offensive line has to take it upon themselves too, though. And it's a pretty veteran group. Like I think we kind of forget about that, but they start three seniors with Hadley Panzer, Taylor Potier, and Carver Willis. And so those are three guys who have been around the program for a really long time. And yeah, they may not have the most experience like we've seen with, the Christian Duffys and the KTs and the Cooper Beebes and Hayden Gillums. Like those guys' personalities compared to those guys that are playing now's personalities are completely different. And yeah, I agree. It's absolutely ridiculous that you have an offensive lineman wandering downfield on a pass play. That just literally can't happen. I mean, if you don't know the plays, you can't play, period. And I think those guys need to take it upon themselves. And so I agree that, having Connor Riley on the field would help. But you know what? We're 10 games into this puppy, and this is what we're seeing. And so I do think the offensive line needs to play better. But I also think they just kind of have to get into a rhythm. And as much as it's going to pain fans to see DJ Giddens run inside zone and run power, K-State's had some success. Like DJ Giddens broke loose on a few runs on Saturday against Arizona State, and he ended up with like 130 yards. And so they're going to try and run the ball against Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati has some studs up front. Dante Corleone is one guy who comes to mind. They call him the Godfather, the best nickname in all of college football. He won't be easy to block, but I think you can have some success running the football. And so, you know what? Will K-State inevitably get 2 yards on an inside zone play? Yes. But is that going to happen? Absolutely. It's football. Like people are going to boo when they call inside zone. But guess what? If you don't
run it,
if you don't run it 20 times, that's fine. If you run it 5, 6 times, that's okay. You have to run that. You have to.
But the problem is it's almost every first down is inside
Right. That's
zone.
the problem.
It's unbelievable. But let's be really honest with our viewers and listeners. A big part of the problem is when you call the RPO with inside zone, Avery's handing it off every time.
Mm-hmm.
He's not pulling it and running. And maybe that's the read he's seeing, but I can't believe they're covering both the outside and the inside. I just don't think the RPO has been effective, and I thought it would be an incredible weapon for this team. But if the quarterback isn't going to run, stop doing it. I was watching Arizona do it in that game early in the season. And I'm like, no, Fafita ain't running the ball. Why bother doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm at with K-State. It makes no sense to me. I even asked Coach Klieman about maybe bringing in Taquan Roberson to run some of that, to run the quarterback run. And he said we didn't even think about it. Well, I'm like, if you're not getting at what you need out of the offense, nothing should be sacred, even your quarterback. But we saw some other guys step up. Trey Spivey, welcome to the show. We've been awaiting your arrival. I hope you don't end up off the field again. You need to be out there. And if a senior is going to run the wrong route, miss a block, I'm going to lose my mind. If he does, it's part of the learning process. Just play him. And Dante Cephas stepped up. He stepped up. He looked like the player we thought he'd be. And I think maybe they were using him in different situations than they had been because they were down 2 receivers. We don't know who's going to be there this week, but do whatever you were doing with him because the dude showed up. The dude made use of it, even if your lineman couldn't hold his water and stay back within that 3-yard zone. So there's so much about this offense that drives me crazy because they have the potential to be really good.
Yep. I'm kind of with the receiver trio that we saw. I want to see Dante Cephas, Jace Brown, and Trey Spivey for a full game. Like, I'm sorry. I love Keegan Johnson. I think he can be a really good inside slot receiver. I think he can be a guy who can be that security blanket over the middle of the field. But when you have those 3 guys out on the field as your receivers at any given time, every single one of those guys can beat you deep. Dante Cephas can go up and make a high point of football and make a contested catch. Trey Spivey, literally, it's the first time I've seen a wide receiver fade in the end zone. Fitz, I couldn't tell you the last time I saw K-State do that. They haven't had a receiver that's looked like Trey Spivey in a really long time. And guess what? He had a drop. But the best part about that game was the fact that he did not let that phase him. He went up and he made some big time plays in some big time situations. And so, situations. And so I'm fully expecting to see Trey Spivey out on the field. I want to see Jace Brown. He didn't have the best game. I think he can bounce back, and I want to see Dante Cephas. And I know that's crazy to say because I think we were all done with him, but there is a lot of potential there. And I understand that he's a senior and he's got 3 games left in a K-State uniform, but there's no reason why he can't help this team win football games. And at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do.
Well, the interesting stat from Saturday's game was the defense gave up 9 of 15 third downs.
Mm.
And a lot of those 9 were third and long. They seem worse in third and long than third and short. I can't explain that. I don't understand that, but that's the reality. K-State's defense, for all it's done right, and it's done some stuff wrong, the back end of the defense has not been as good as expected. It's those third downs that still haunt them. If they're good on third down, they're good. But boy, when it's 3rd and 9 plus, you can't be giving those up more often than not. You're going to lose every football game, and that's what we're seeing. What's going on with the defense?
I look at it from a multiple lenses here, Fitz. And the first thing I saw against Arizona State was they didn't blitz. They really didn't blitz. And they couldn't blitz because if they blitzed Sam Levitt, if they didn't get him, he was scrambling for a first down. And you look at what Cincinnati does, and the Cincinnati quarterback is probably the best pocket passer that K-State's played since Shedeur Sanders. And he's not going to be a guy that's going to get out and scramble as much. And so I think we probably will see some more blitzes. But the reason they struggled so much on third and long is because they couldn't get a pass rush. They literally could not get to the quarterback. Toby Osensami forced a hold on a third and long that was negated by a face mask on Marquis Siegel when there wasn't even a play in his direction. So I think it starts with getting to the quarterback. And, Brendan Mott has not gotten a sack. I want to say 2 games when he was on pace to maybe break the school record. And so maybe on senior night, we see Brendan Mott make a few big plays. I don't know. But I think if they're able to get to the quarterback, then those defensive backs don't have to cover as long. And for whatever issue, for whatever reason, that's been an issue, is when they have to cover for more than 3 or 4 seconds, it becomes very difficult for the secondary, especially when they get past the cornerbacks into the next level to where the safeties are. So getting to the quarterback would be my answer, is how they can get off the field on third.
I agree. They didn't do very well with that. They're trying to do it without bringing a bunch of guys. Didn't work. That makes me sad, honestly, because I thought these DNs were going to be really good. Again, I might have misled K-Staters. I just haven't seen from what I expected. I also feel like in some ways they're not being asked to do as much as I thought they'd be. They're not having that demand.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the best thing is to be Felix Anudike-Uzomah and just get forced to play, because you got to play, man. You got to get better. You got to do this. And we saw him rise to the occasion. I know they like rotating guys, but I sometimes feel like they need to get the group of guys that are getting it done and let them do their job, and not keep pulling them off and breaking their rhythm. I don't know. Yeah.
I think Toby's getting there, by the way.
Oh,
I'm excited.
Yeah.
He's getting there. He's going to be a stud.
He really is. Cole, does K-State bounce back and get this done?
I do. I think K-State finds a way to win. And I know a lot of people are iffy on the point spread. I think at the time we record this, it's 8.5. I think they cover. I think this K-State team finds a way to bounce back. I know that, again, I've said it on podcasts throughout the week, but every time K-State fans and K-State people, everyone is down on this team, they find a way to surprise you. And I think that this team is going to rally around Chris Klieman. They're going to rally around their quarterback, and they're going to find a way to get it done. And they're going to have some positive momentum heading into the biggest game of the season in Ames against the Iowa State Cyclones.
Everything you just said, I basically said last week, and it didn't happen. Yep. I hope you're right, because I was wrong. And if this team puts out another lethargic effort, the cost is going to be in fan support.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take the fans for granted. They're not going to come watch you not put on a show. And that's what they did last week, and it was sad. Thank you, Cole Carmody, for filling in for Big B. Did a fine job, young man.
Thank you.
And after this break, we'll be back with our own Ryan Wallace as he digs into the Cincinnati Bearcats, gives us his opinion on what they're doing well and why have they lost 3 games in a row. Yep, someone's got to shake it off this weekend. Someone's going to win in Manhattan. We're going to find out who it is on Saturday, but we're going to keep exploring this matchup between the Cats, the Bearcats and Wildcats, on Saturday night at Bill Snyder Family Stadium. We'll be right back. Don't forget, we're sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing.
It's time to take a break for our sponsors. We'll be back with more from GoPowercat.com.
Weddle & Sons Roofing. Protecting homes, businesses, and providing peace of mind for more than 25 years. Weddle & Sons is your Tesla solar roofing outlet.
Now let's head back to the show for more K-State sports coverage. from GoPowercat.com.
Welcome back to the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by our friends at Weddle & Sons Roofing. And now we move on to the Cincinnati Scout with our own Ryan Wallace, who handles such endeavors for us because I'm not smart enough to do it on my own. Look, Wally, we just kind of joked about this before, but there's a big thread of truth to this. Cincinnati is what Cincinnati is. I mean, they're a good football team. They're not overwhelming. They do some really nice things. They got some good players. But this game's mostly about how does K-State react? Because I feel like if they come out like the K-State team they should be, they're going to win. And if they come out like the team that took the field last week, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
Am I crazy on that?
No, I mean, it was funny because like the research that I did on Cincinnati, like you're sitting there watching games and you're like, and I feel like I've said this on this pregame show so many times, and it kind of describes the Big 12 this season, but I'm like, they're like a player or two away, or, a scheme, like some schematic wrinkle or two away from like, being BYU, and BYU's a schematic wrinkle or play or two away from being like, West Virginia. Like it's a lot of teams that seem to have what you need to be competitive, and yet some have found that edge, right, that have allowed them to win. Arizona State is similar to Cincinnati, but they've found ways to win. And then you've got an Arizona team that kind of resembles, again, they've got a lot of pieces and they haven't figured it out. So with Cincinnati, you're right, though, with regards to the Wildcats of like, yeah, if you don't show up, this is a team that's competitive enough and has enough of the pieces that they can come on the road and beat you. And yet at the same time, if K-State wants to come out and be the K-State that we got to know earlier in the season, the K-State, the blueprint that we know exists under Chris Klieman, they have the ability to really put a damper on Cincinnati relatively early in this game,
Yeah,
I think.
I agree. And that's no disrespect to Cincinnati. It's just Kansas State's performance levels have been volatile, up and down, and down as of late. But what does this Cincinnati team do well? Because I think even though they've lost 3 straight, they're overachieving in terms of what we thought they would be this season.
No doubt. I mean, Brendan Sorsby is probably the biggest reason for that. He's a pretty good quarterback. The thing that has happened of late with Cincinnati is, I think early on, though he played a little bit at Indiana, I think there was still some nuance to him. The teams hadn't gotten a whole lot of kind of collection of what he is, right? And deeper as we've gotten into the season, defenses have started to adjust, and you've started to see them do some things with safeties and how they've manipulated their secondary to really nullify what Cincinnati was doing earlier in the season from a passing standpoint. I looked back, and you look at 70-plus yard receiving performances against Power 4 opponents individually, right? Over the course of the last 4 games, that's only happened once. They've had one receiver go for 70-plus. Whereas the first 4 games includes Pitt, a non-con game against Pitt. They had 6. That happened 6 times. So that's, again, pretty clear statistic of what defenses have figured out with Cincinnati is this is an offensive line that pass protects fairly well. Run blocks okay. And they've got a quarterback that I think throws a deep ball, God, as good as Jalen Daniels. I mean, I would put him up there with, Retzlaff, Daniels, guys, when they have a receiver that's down there fairly open and they've got protection, Brendan Sorsby can deliver a quality deep ball. But again, when you kind of start to take that away, I like Kiner as the running back, but he's not anything elite. And so that's why you've seen these last 3 games, Fitz, Sorsby's running numbers are way, way above normal. I think 3 of his top 4 rushing performances on the season have come in the last 3 weeks. But again, that's because defenses are just saying, we'll give you the run, Brendan Sorsby. You do that. And he's not dynamic, Fitz. Let me put that out there first. I think his rushing numbers are big because he has like 20 yards to work with because they're just dropping everybody. But so getting back to the point of the question, good throwing team when defenses have allowed their receivers to just kind of get open and you allow Sorsby to sit back there and command the pocket. Defensively, I think they're really sound in kind of playing their assignment. They will hold their gaps really well in the front seven. I like the linebackers, really good run stuffing team. They don't allow, ground attacks to really get churning. And they proved that against Arizona State with Cam Scadaboo. Dante Corleone is their nose tackle in the middle with one of the greatest nicknames in college football,
Absolutely.
the Godfather.
That's
If he gets going, that's a problem because they don't really have a great pass rush. And so if you allow Dante Corleone to be more than just a gap plug and you start allowing him to maneuver around the line of scrimmage and get into the backfield, now you've got to put more emphasis on him on the inside and it frees up some guys on the outside. That's when I've seen Cincinnati's defense come alive, because otherwise they're sound, they're where they're supposed to be, Fitz, but they're not creating a lot of turnovers in the secondary. 4 interceptions on the season, only 2 in Big 12 play. And again, they're not great at kind of attacking a pass rusher, getting sacks, creating turnovers. So they're sound, but they're just not super aggressive and super playmaking and dynamic on the defensive side.
Okay, let's go back to that Cincinnati offense, because you said something alarming there. They can be stopped if the secondary does their assignments.
Yeah.
I hate to be stereotypical about performances, but that sounds like they're going to have a good day, because K-State's defensive secondary is lost half the time.
Yeah, if I got to see, Marquise Siegel or Jordan Riley, I mean, last week we talked about if I got to see Jordan Riley, try and arm tackle a guy at their neck, that I was going to throw the remote through the television. If I got to see Jordan Riley like turn around and point at some guy like, I thought you had him.
Yeah.
Between Riley and Siegel, the amount of times we've seen that this year, that's the kind of thing, you're right, Fitz, that cannot happen on Saturday night. They got to be locked in with communication. I think Cincinnati, kind of like Arizona, I mean, I don't know if they're it's not as dink and dunky kind of as the Arizona State offense is, in terms of just kind of picking up 8, 10, 9 kind of yards. I think Cincinnati wants to hit you for a little bit harder. And they just haven't been able to do it, but that's because the safeties that they've played and the defensive coordinators have been on their game plan. We know Marquise Siegel can do that. We saw it at the end of last year. We know VJ Payne can do it. He's been out there for better part of 3 seasons now, right?
Yep.
At least 2.5. They've got to just deliver. And again, to in their defense, some of that goes back to, Keenan Garber's got to know what he's supposed to be doing. Jacob Parrish has to know what he's supposed to be doing. So that's an interesting point, Fitz. I think that, to me, is the focal point when you look at when Cincinnati has the ball versus the K-State defense. I'm not worried about K-State's front seven. We haven't been worried about K-State's front seven all season. This is yet another game where all eyes should be focused on how that secondary is performing.
Well, that sounds great. Now let's flip it back over to what they do on defense, because they got a beast in the middle. K-State seems determined to run the ball with DJ Giddens in the middle. That isn't particularly working, and I don't think the Godfather is going to let it work very often either. K-State better come with a different plan.
I think they have to. They've proven week to week to be really solid at running off tackle. And for whatever reason, Kansas State does not want to run off tackle, whether it's DJ Giddens or Dylan Edwards or Avery Johnson. When they get to the outside, they've been pretty good. And I don't mean all the way to the outside, because we've had this discussion about wide receivers blocking. I'm talking off tackle, not to the sideline. But yeah, I mean, it's not a great matchup. We've talked before, Fitz. I'm a big Sam Heck believer. I think Sam Heck is just scratching the surface. He's going to get there, folks. But he's also the lightest guy on the line of scrimmage. And when you're going against Corleone and you have Panzer and Potier playing, as questionable as they have, honestly, for the last several weeks, for guys that have as much experience as those two do, it doesn't bode well for your interior. And so this, to me, feels like a great game to, maybe you pull those guards and you let them be lead blockers on the outside, or you let Carver Willis and Easton Kilty be your guys and run behind those tight ends as well. I like that idea, Fitz. It seems to work in my head, going into pregame here, because again, Cincinnati has struggled at times coming up, defending the run out of the secondary. I like their linebackers, but they're not overly athletic. Again, they're kind of good in their gaps, but when you ask them to get out and make open field stuff, I don't know if they're really the strongest team. So all of that jives for me, Fitz, but it's up to, the offensive line to execute it, and it's up to the offensive staff to make it happen.
No Dylan Edwards, probably, if
Mhm.
that really was a hamstring. No, probably Keegan Johnson either. And yet I feel like K-State found some answers at receiver with some other guys. Dante Cephas in particular decided, hey, I got to step
Right?
up.
Right.
Um, that's what they've been seeing in practice. That's why he's been playing, but it's been a while since he kind of popped up in a game. And, I don't know where I was going with this. I'm really worried about this game now after you spoke. I'm like, everything they do is a problem for K-State. And someone's got to win. It's a combined 5-game losing streak between these two teams. Someone's going to get off the schneid, but whatever that means. And I'm not sure Kansas State's in a good mental space. That's what makes it so impossible to predict. This is about up here more than anything, maybe for both teams.
Well, and I mean, we went into this show last week, and I was talking about how I thought that, this was a K-State team that would cover, because I just thought they're going to be pissed off. They're going to come back ready to go at home, and it was completely the opposite. Again, on the table this week, maybe not all of the things from a Big 12 championship are still at stake, but I thought you did a great job on the GoPowercat podcast this week of explaining, like, a 10-win season is still there.
Yeah.
Or you can be the 7-win team. Like, there's still a lot in terms of K-State history that is at large here that, you can really determine here in the last couple weeks. And you would think on senior night that they would be pumped as all hell to do this. But again, if you let Cincinnati hang around, they haven't been great on the road at times, but they're competitive. And they're amped too, Fitz, because remember, this is a team that's fighting for a bowl bid. And so Cincinnati absolutely wants this win. And I think they know that this is the type of victory, Fitz, that would kind of elevate them in the pecking order too.
Yep, I agree. I know where I was going now. Without Dylan Edwards, we saw Joe Jackson. This isn't a bad thing. I think they can unlock some different things in this playbook and this offense because they have different dudes.
Yeah, to me, it's time. I get, and maybe on senior night, that's not the thing you want to hear. And maybe when you're at the end of the year, you want to go with the vets and everything. But like, to me, you have the red shirt rule where you can maximize 4 games so that you can play some guys. You have all this depth that you talk about so you can play some guys. We've gotten this far kind of with what's to go back to, whatever that means, the horse that brung you. Like we've gone this far with the Dante Cephases of the world. And yeah, maybe there's an Arizona State game that peaks out, but like, maybe it's time for more Trey Spivey. Maybe we're overdue for more Joe Jackson. Maybe, as you and I have said, maybe it's time for Jack Fabris. Like, let's see some guys. I think, we've gone far enough kind of giving the vets the benefit of the doubt in a lot of cases. And, we're at a point now where this deep into the season, it's not just about 24. It's kind of seeing what we can do with 25 outside of just bowl practices and bye weeks. Let's throw them out on the field under the lights and see what they can do. I think this is a great opportunity for a guy like Joe Jackson, because I'm with you. I don't know if Dylan's going to go, and if he is, he's not going to be Dylan. So let's let Joe Jackson ride out there. Let's get Devon Rice out there. Jimmy White, he's got some speed. Throw guys out there. It's time to see who really wants it, Fitz.
Yeah,
because we're tired of watching the lethargic kind of K-State go out there and look uninspired when so much is at stake. If you're not going to deliver, I think it's time for, hopefully over the course of the last week, it was time for the staff to have some hard questions and hard conversations with folks. And I would say that, the leash is short.
Yeah, I agree.
I would hope.
One guy I want to really emphasize that, I mean, he's not the only guy that seems to play hard. You can say that about Austin Moore, but Brendan Mott his motor's been nonstop this year. Now offensives have figured out they've got to get him bottled up a little bit. He was on the verge of blowing away the season, single season sack record. Now he's kind of stalled. I feel like this is a game he might break loose and get going again because he's kind of been quiet. So maybe they won't be paying as much attention to him, but that kid has earned every bit of his 6th season. He's come back and made the most of it.
he should. Yeah, I don't want to like get into who should and who shouldn't, but I mean, there really shouldn't be a question of what type of ovation Brendan Mott deserves on Saturday night.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be thunderous for everything that he's done, the journey to go from the preferred walk-on to as good as he's been for really his whole career, but particularly this year. Fitz, I talked about, defenses against Cincinnati that have been able to just kind of drop the secondary and do that. The other way you can kind of go against that if you have a secondary that is problematic, such as K-State, is you unleash a guy like Brendan Mott. I mean, you have the pass rush do the job that the secondary, kind of should be able to do. It's like, all right, well, we're not so confident in our secondary, but we're confident as hell in that front seven. So we're going to just go at Brendan Sorsby. So I think Brendan Mott, again, a guy that should have a lot to play for in this one with his final home game. This is a great game for him. Damon Alalio's performance has kind of, stuttered a little bit at times here down the stretch. This is a great game for him to get going again, because again, that will help Brendan Mott alleviate some of the pressures that he has on him and the attention that he has. So all of those guys, I think this is a huge opportunity for them. And again, it's there if they want to take it, if they want to just reach up and take it, it's there for them to come out. It's not going to be an easy win, because again, I think the Big 12 has proven this season that there isn't an easy win. But it's one that I think that they can, finally get a stronghold of, unlike we've seen since West Virginia.
Yeah, I agree.
Pretty much.
And I swear I saw Brendan Mott play a little linebacker last week. He was lined up basically where Des Purnell is typically.
That big cat role.
Yeah. And he was off the line. It was pretty interesting. I think they're finding ways to keep him on the field, because he's been really special all season long.
Can I give you a magic number here, Fitz?
Absolutely.
I want to sneak in a magic number, because I'd kind of forgotten about it until now, and maybe it's kind of a good way to polish this off. But there's a magic number that I found, and it's kind of ironic, and it's 20. This is what I want fans to keep an eye on. And it'll kind of give you an idea of, is this game being dictated by Cincinnati, or is K-State going to flex its muscle? And I put this in our As Recruits feature on GoPowercat this week towards the bottom. So the mark is 20 points, and here's why. Under Scott Satterfield, Cincinnati owns one victory when its opponent scores 20 plus. And that came last September when Cincinnati held off Pitt, and Pitt scored 21. So think about that. Think about that. Since then, this is a program that has gone 6-14 since the Pitt game, and all 6 wins, they've held their opponent under 20. And every loss, the opponent has scored 21 or more. Crazy. 3 touchdowns. That's all it takes, Fitz.
That's crazy. Well, that's a good magic number to have, because if K-State loses, that will be a magic number of beers for some fans in the parking lot after the game. I do not condone binge drinking. I might understand it, but I don't condone it. Thank you, Ryan Wallace. Appreciate it very much. We know a lot more about Cincinnati Bearcats, and we turn our attention back to K-State after the break with Chris Klieman, Avery Johnson, and a little gambling insights, sports betting insights from our own Ryan Gilbert. We will be right back.
It's time to take a break for our sponsors. We'll be back with more from GoPowercat.com.
Whittle & Sons Roofing. Protecting homes, businesses, and providing peace of mind for more than 25 years. Whittle & Sons is your Tesla solar roofing outlet.
Now let's head back to the show for more K-State sports coverage from GoPowercat.com.
Welcome back to the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Whittle & Sons Roofing. We've got 2 segments down, and now it's time to start number 3. And we start, as we always do, with Chris Klieman and some of his thoughts on this team they're about to play. And also, I asked him a pretty big question at the start of his press conference, because leading into Monday's press conference, there was a lot of talk about Chris Klieman stepping away. Seemed like a good place for me to start in our conversations, and we'll get to a few other things that were brought up during the course of that Monday press conference. And then we have Avery Johnson. We'll hear from Avery briefly before we move into our final segment with Gills. Here we go. Here's Chris Klieman from Monday's press conference.
Good afternoon, everyone. Obviously disappointing performance on Saturday, and had a long staff meeting yesterday and talked about a lot of things. And it's interesting because if you look at offense, defense, and special teams, I don't think anybody could point a finger at anybody because I don't think any unit played up to its capability. And we struggled on third down on defense. We struggled to rush the football early. Had a couple of turnovers, couldn't get off the field, had a couple opportunities to kick a couple field goals that maybe could have made it a one-score game late. Didn't do it. And so, we got some guys hurting. I know that because they want to win and want to be successful. And so, our job is this week to get them right and right the ship because we have another opportunity at home here. And these seniors, especially these 6-year guys that came in with me when I started and the 5th-year guys that been around us for a long time, I want to make sure that those guys have an opportunity to go out well and go out successfully. So we've got to attack this week and have a really good week of practice. And we've got some guys banged up that we don't know a lot about yet that will probably be more later in the week. But we do have some injury issues that we've got to make sure that we have enough depth.
Coach, I want to clear this thing up first because we've been getting a rumor that you're going to retire. I just want to put that out there so you shoot it down.
I don't know where you got that from, Fitz. I haven't said that to anybody. Okay.
Okay.
Especially if I'd announced it here and he's sitting here. I'd have had more issues than that. Plus, my wife's not in town. I'd be really in trouble.
With that out of the way, what any big decisions to come out of that meeting with your coaches?
We've got to focus on the task at hand, and I'm not any time thinking about making wholesale changes on one side of the ball or another, or personnel, whatever you want to talk about. We've got to find a way to get better, and we've got to find a way to stay the course. And Gene hired me 6 years ago to run this football program, and I'm going to run this football program to the best of my ability every day to give us a chance to be successful on Saturday. And I know we've had a couple of tough losses and that I'm frustrated about, but we still have, in my opinion, a really, really strong culture and a strong program here.
Due to injuries and absences, you got some younger guys on the field.
Yeah.
And Dante Cephas kind of evolved into a bigger role. What did you see that is tangible out of that?
Boy, Trey Spivey and Dante Cephas came up big time. Keegan had an injury during warm-ups, and J-Jack wasn't available Saturday, so it became those two guys getting the lion's share of the reps with Jace and Ty. And I was so proud of Trey Spivey getting that opportunity and making some really good plays. The 2-point conversion catch was phenomenal, and the 4th down catch was big. That's going to help him grow and continue to improve as he's getting more experience in this system. Cephas is just here for a year, but I thought he showed up and played big time. And then when we lost Dylan as well, we had a lot of things that probably wouldn't have mattered. I think Arizona State had a really good plan, but we had maybe 10, 12 plays specifically for Dylan that we couldn't get off and couldn't get executed because he wasn't in there. And probably the only thing that I regret was not finding a way to still talk about getting those plays involved and utilizing somebody else. You guys also know that probably DJ's not at 100% either. And he's fighting through a lot of things, just like a lot of kids are in later November. But we had to lean on DJ quite a bit. Then we throw Joe Jackson in, and Joe Jackson did some really good things. So there's some promising things coming out of some unfortunate circumstances on Saturday with Trey Spivey, with Joe Jackson playing really good football. And I know that's given those kids a lot of confidence, and it's given our staff a lot of confidence in them.
Quick, having a weekend to kind of evaluate, think back on things. What things different would you like to see out of this offense?
I think personally, just starts with me. I just got to play a little bit better. Just want us to be a little bit more explosive, be able to, be on the same page, and just play how we know we can play.
Because of injuries and other things, you had some new receivers out there. And plus, you Dante kind of became more of a target. Did you find some things in your receiving core that really worked for you?
Yeah, I think Trey had a really good game. I think Saturday really boosted his confidence level and showed that, how talented of a receiver he can be. And then Seif, too, just going out there and making plays. I know his confidence kind of dropped earlier in the season, but he's a fully capable receiver, a guy that can make plays for us down the stretch, and I think he showed that on Saturday night as well.
Coach came in here a few minutes ago and said he might encourage the offense to start using you more as a runner in his last 2 games. Said use the term cut it loose in the run game with you. Just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, just at this point, whatever I can do to help the team win, and I'm obviously have shown that I could be a dangerous runner and haven't been able to showcase that these past few weeks, but definitely excited about that, being able to go out there and just show what I can do with my legs and kind of getting in that mindset earlier in the week, starting right now, of going out there and just trying to exploit some things with my legs.
That was Chris Klieman and Avery Johnson. Now let's turn our attention to the sports betting odds on Kansas State and Cincinnati with our own Ryan Gilbert to take us through these numbers, some very interesting numbers. But the first one I think we agree on is a little bit strange. The team we saw in Manhattan last week as the home team shouldn't be favored by 8.5 points over Cincinnati. But here we are. They are. It seems high. Cincinnati's lost 3 in a row. K-State's lost 2 in a row. Someone's going to win, in theory. But this number seems awfully high for this game.
Yeah, it's deeper than just what we saw on Saturday against Arizona State. This is back-to-back poor performances from Kansas State. I think it was easy to maybe write off that game in Houston, given the weather and all that stuff. But I haven't really been betting against Kansas State at home this year, but there's no real reason to feel confident putting your money on Kansas State, given what we saw against Arizona State. Now, I get it. Both teams are struggling. Cincinnati's certainly struggling, losing 3 in a row. So I would have to go with the away team, Cincinnati, here, just because 8.5 is a lot of points. Cincinnati doesn't have to play its perfect game or a pretty game by any stretch, to lose it by a touchdown. I have a hard time seeing Kansas State win this by double digits. And so until you can see otherwise from this Kansas State team, I would stay away from it, or I would bet Cincinnati.
I would agree. They haven't earned any trust here after what they did. Now, one of the things they've been pretty consistent about here during the middle part of the season is not doing well offensively in the first half. They've struggled quite a bit. In fact, scoring touchdowns in the first quarter has been a challenge. And yet, we look at the odds for this game. They think Kansas State will win that first quarter by 3.5 points or more. Really? This one, I would probably, if I did bet Cincinnati would be leading after the first quarter, because that's kind of what K-State's been doing.
Yeah, and I hate to always bring up the previous game, but Kansas State played fine. Honestly, Fitz, in the second half once it started going up tempo and played more comfortably. But, K-State struggled early on in games, like you said. And so Cincinnati here, plus 3.5. Why not take it? Kansas State over the last 5 games, only one time has Kansas State been leading by more than 3 points at the end of the first quarter. And that was at West Virginia. I think they scored a touchdown with like 20 seconds left to barely get over the hump and be covering that spread in the first quarter. So, yeah, Cincinnati, obviously Kansas State, until you can see it otherwise, it kind of goes hand in hand with the spread. I'd feel more comfortable about the first quarter than the entirety of the game, because Kansas State at home, it's much easier for them to get in a groove and maybe settle in. But early on, there's some tension, I'm sure, in the locker room after back-to-back losses. Is the confidence all there? Coming out of the locker room, give me the away team to stay within a field goal at the very least.
One of the things we'll be interested in seeing with this game is K-State had success with that up-tempo offense in the second half against Arizona State. Maybe it was the defense just changing how they're going about business because they're protecting a lead. But it looked like Avery Johnson and the offense got into a much better rhythm, which brings us to Avery's pass attempts in this game. If they go up tempo, there'll be more plays, there'll be more passes. Is there something available here for fans?
Well, as of right now, when we're recording, no, but I would encourage you all to keep an eye on this for his passing attempts. You mentioned it, if Kansas State maybe gets behind and goes tempo. then by all means, you're going to have to throw it a lot. But also with Avery Johnson's health, I don't have a lot of confidence with him running the football. And so that's going to just give you, maybe not more passing attempts directly, but DJ Giddens might get the fruits of that a little bit. But at the end of the day, Avery's going to be throwing it more if he's not healthy, if they're playing behind, if they're playing up tempo. And it's not just this game in a vacuum, though, Fitz. The last game against Arizona State, Avery Johnson threw it 40 times. The previous game against Houston was 39. Those are both his highest passing attempts of the season. And so this team's kind of throwing it a lot right now. Defenses are loading the box. DJ Giddens hasn't been going up to his standards as of late. I think K-State's going to have to try to sling it in this game, air it out to try to win it.
And with that, we saw Trey Spivey play with two of the starting receivers sidelined. We don't know the status of Keegan Johnson and Jaden Jackson this week. But Trey Spivey proved something. He dropped his first ball, but he made a really tough catch on a 2-point conversion. We've been wanting more Spivey. We see a connection there between him and Avery. I think he'll play. I don't know that they'll post any bets on him in yardage, but you like something with him.
Yep. One man's misfortune is another man's opportunity. And Trey Spivey rose to that occasion. And yeah, I don't know if his yardage will be up on any of the sites, but I mean, without a doubt, you can at least find, anytime, first time touchdown score, stuff like that. But if you can find, yardage or receptions, by all means, I think Trey Spivey proved against Arizona State that he belongs on the field. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with Jaden Jackson or Keegan Johnson, but I would probably say this about Dante Cephas as well, Fitz. I mean, he had 4 catches and he had that big long touchdown that got wiped back. But, Cephas hasn't been the best all year. We've been critical of him on GoPowercat throughout the season, but he had probably his best game of the year. Spivey, without a doubt, had his best game of the year. So these are, Spivey in particular, I like with 4 receptions, 56 yards, and that 2-point catch against the Sun Devils. But also Dante Cephas, that's obviously maybe an if. I would keep an eye on the coordinators on Thursday. If there's an update on either of those wideouts, which Fitz, you'll have to ask because I won't be there. I'll be out traveling to Paradise. But, some of those in this is I don't think Joe Jackson, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. There's not going to be a line for him. But at this point in the season, you've lost 2 in a row. You're kind of, I don't want to say you have nothing to lose, but you're playing with house money a little bit and maybe switch things up. I would like to see K-State go down its depth chart and see maybe those, I wouldn't call them reserves, but backups or what have you getting on the field. I think Trey Spivey, though, is certainly the one that you should keep an eye on.
I would agree with that. I think one of the things K-State can do is put in some of these players to try to get some energy. And I thought both Spivey and Cephas did that last week. They got them going. Okay, if you were looking for a number concerning Cincinnati, what would you be looking for?
Tony Johnson, receiver for Cincinnati. He's probably their quickest guy, and he's also very consistent. I like his over, probably on his yards, maybe if you want to get him for a touchdown or something. But Fitz, we know Kansas State secondary has not gotten issues fixed throughout this season, and so you want that guy, kind of the home run hitter, like I said, the quick receiver who can get behind or get and find those holes in that zone defense against Kansas State. So Tony Johnson, again, we don't have the numbers here, but I would certainly pay attention to his lines as they come out throughout the week. And I think he's got a chance to make some noise against Kansas State's defense as kind of their boom guy.
Very interesting stuff from Ryan Gilbert. He is headed to what is this tournament called? The
Paradise Jam.
It is the Paradise Jam.
Yeah, K-State won it back in 2019 with Barry Dean and Cam senior year.
Well, it's not the Gills in Paradise Jam. So remember that. It's not about you. You're going to cover basketball. Maybe do a halftime show. You might want to work on that. If you're going, you might get called into duty. That will be awkward if you don't have anything worked up. You might get on that.
They should get me the halftime in-game entertainment. They should pick me. Like Kelly in Vegas last year in the Bahamas, she got picked for the spelling bee. I don't think she got a single word right, but that's neither here nor there.
That's the Kelly we know. She's about the numbers, not the letters. And Ryan Gilbert is about the numbers also. Thank you, Ryan Gilbert. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, boss.
Thank you, Ryan Gilbert. Always good stuff. He is not here now. As you watch this, he is on his way to the islands to cover basketball for Kansas State. and see if the K-State Hoops Cats can show a little bit better effort there in the Islands as they play Friday against George Washington. If they win, they're off on Saturday, allowing Gills to watch this football game, and I think we're all in favor of that. We appreciate you watching this pregame show as we do this every week throughout football season, and we will have you ready for next week's game against Iowa State when that time comes, even though it's a holiday week. For the entire GoPowercat staff, I so appreciate you subscribing to this channel and viewing our content. And if you're going to the game, you got it. I will see you at the Bill.
Thank you for watching GoPowercat.com's Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production.